Guess what today is? It is Tuesday. We are live. It is 7 o'clock on the dot. And the whole R. Kelly song, however Gene was saying it. But anyways, this is Stories with Kishen, ordinary people with extraordinary lives. I am excited to be before you to share another extraordinary story by somebody some of you may know and some of you may not know. But rest assured, his story is unique in its own right, but there may be somebody who can identify with this. I encourage you to like, to share, to comment, to do all of that, because that's just what we do. And if you've missed any episodes of Stories with Kishen, you can always go to SoundCloud and just type in Stories with Kishen podcast, or on Facebook, Stories with Kishen videos. And they're all one and the same, just different social mediums to get to them. If you've listened to any of the teasers for tonight's show, you know that I will be bringing shortly to the broadcast Gene Baker. Gene Baker is an individual who has just his journey in life has been different for some people. And then again, you may be able to connect with it. But he was born to a mother who was Irish and Swedish, and a father who was from the West Indies, making him biracial. And so he's going to share his story of some of the challenges that he faced growing up. He's going to share a story about how successful he is now. There's just so much to him. But without further ado, I am going to bring to the broadcast Gene Baker.
Hey,
Yay! You know, the whole crowd, got to do the crowd thing. Hey, Gene, thanks so much for joining me tonight to talk about your story. But what's interesting is you say you have been Zooming all day.
Zoom.
Did you watch Zoom growing up? Did you watch Zoom growing up? Oh, so you talk about the Teddy Riley Zoom.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
All I want to do.
I remember that. I do remember that. I was in college doing the rump shaker.
Okay. Yes.
I remember. Oh my gosh.
I remember that.
See there. We all got a story. We all got a past, which is all good. So Gene, you reached out and we actually met.
Yeah.
Last year during the Leadership Experience Tour, the Fair Consulting Group Leadership Experience Tour.
Yep.
And now, did you interview or did you present in September, or were you earlier in the year?
I think I presented in that show, but I was more just been one of the coaches.
Okay, gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
So you have been a coach
I've been
all along?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Oh, so maybe you can teach me something.
Let's talk.
Wait a minute. Or for people who are interested in coaching, can they reach out to you?
Absolutely. You know, I do have my own show, like as you mentioned earlier, Gene's Tune-Up Time, which is a show all about leadership. But I've been a leader in some capacity for the last 20 years. Also have certain certifications for executive coaching and behavioral analysis. So absolutely, if people are interested in a career development or, just understanding themselves better as it relates to their career path, certainly reach out to me at bakergene91@gmail.com.
You know what? And I will make sure that you mention that again later on, right before we wrap up, because people, especially nowadays, they do want to better themselves, figure out what they can do to get to the next level. And sometimes they don't even think about coaching, but I think that would definitely be a way that they can have an assessment and get to that next level of where they want to be in their career. So see, you are just multi-talented with all these gifts and talents, and they're just oozing all over the place.
Blessed.
So what you talk about, and before we get into the nooks and crannies of your story, you mentioned that you also have a show, Gene's Tune-Up Time. So let's talk a little bit about that, just in case somebody wants to check you out on the digital TV platform.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So, as I mentioned, my career has been in leadership, and my passion is leadership. I actually work for my day job. I work for a large pharmaceutical organization, and I do leadership development there as part of one of my gigs at the organization. So it's a passion of mine. I really enjoy it, and so I figured, you know what, if I'm going to do a show, why not do a show on something that I'm passionate about? And so it's a show about leadership. So I can interview leaders from all over the world, and we just talk about how they lead, what are the things that they focused on? How did they get through the difficult times? How do they push their teams? How do they develop their people? How do they really focus in and connect with their people, et cetera? So all kinds of leadership topics. So if you're into that kind of thing, if you're into leadership, if you're into developing people, it's a show that you want to listen to.
And if somebody wants to watch Gene's Tune-Up Time, they can go to where?
Go to OnStage Plus. It's an app. It's called OnStage Plus. OnStage Plus is also in Roku and Apple and Google Play and all the digitals. It has a huge reach. And then look under the Sean Fair Digital TV Network.
Got it.
And then look under Gene's Tune-Up Time. So all the shows, there's multiple shows under the Sean Fair Digital TV Network, and I'm one of those shows, as are you.
Yeah, I am. So exciting. Okay, well, thanks so much for giving us that commercial. I think it's good for people to know who you are as they're listening to your story, because again, Stories with Kishen, ordinary people with extraordinary lives. So let's talk a little bit about your background and where you came from. And when you and I got a chance to talk, you mentioned that you had a very interesting childhood. So let's just walk us through that.
Yeah. So born in New Jersey, and I was born into a situation where my biological mom was in a difficult period of her life and was not able to, care for me. And elected to put me into the foster care system relatively early. My biological father was pretty much out of the picture. I don't know, probably before I was born or soon after. And so went into the foster care system, and, as many moms do, they struggle with that decision. So, and she struggled and really wanted to take care of me, but just wasn't in a position to do that. But she kept on taking me back. Until finally, I think, probably the state said, look, you send them back into the system. That's it. And at some point, it just became, a permanent thing where she signed away rights. So my last foster home, I was there for like a year. So I went to 7 different foster homes and stayed at the last one for a year before I was adopted exactly on my 4th birthday.
So wait a minute, you had been through 7 different, so that means, and you're not 4 yet. So for the first 3 years and some months, you had lived in 7 different locations, not including with your mom.
Yeah. So, and I don't, I was too young to really remember all of that. I do know that her new boyfriend wasn't too fond of me. And I think there was some abuse there. But, I don't remember any of that really, except for maybe some feelings of fright, maybe. But just wanting to belong. So, it sounds, dramatic, but really you don't remember that, but it probably did help shape me, just not wanting to make waves and wanting to get along, because you wanted to feel, a belonging somewhere, even at that young age. So there might be some transition of that behavior into my adult life.
So You end up you said you lived with this family or this couple. It was a white couple. And again, your mom was white and your dad was black.
Mhm.
But you had lived with this couple and they eventually adopted you.
So, all right. So, like, my birth dad was out of the picture. My mom had a new boyfriend who didn't like me. I ended up getting adopted by my parents, who are white.
So, real quick, because you said your mom's boyfriend didn't like you and he was not black, he was white.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
but you had this curly hair.
You're reading between the lines.
So it's clear, I mean, there was a difference and that bothered him to the point that whatever happened.
Happened.
So you moved in with this couple.
Yep. And, my adoptive mom was, or parents, were not able to have their own children. So they ended up adopting 4 kids. So they adopted I have 2 brothers from Canada who are white. And then I have a sister from West Virginia who is mixed, like I am. So they adopted 4 kids.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
They
So
were like, look, we want them. Give them to us. We'll take them.
Take them all. We had the Rainbow Coalition going on.
Let's talk about that, because when you and I initially talked about what that looked like for you growing up, the family, it was a pretty close-knit family, but there were some challenges that one of the brothers faced as a teen. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, it's especially, well, any child can have certain situations, but when you're adopted and you come from a situation that was rough and where maybe you shouldn't have seen a lot of the things that you saw, that can really damage, emotionally a child, if not physically, but certainly emotionally. And I think my oldest brother, who's 4 years older than me, certainly had seen more than he should have seen at the age that, before he was adopted. And that kind of messed him up for a while. And so he went through a really bad period in his life. I mean, always getting in trouble, police bringing him home all the time. Those were back in the days when police would actually bring the kid home.
Right. I'm like, they don't do that now.
And so, he ended up, it just was an untenable situation at home. They tried all kinds of counseling to send him to a boys' home. By the time he was 14, he was gone. So I was 10 years old when my brother was out of the house. So essentially, I never talked to him again for about a good 7 years.
So what happened? Because as you're growing up, you're getting older. What impact did that have on you identifying with who you were or who you are?
Well, I mean, from the one standpoint, that was my oldest brother. I really did look up to him. And he was a big kid. I was a small kid. So that was kind of my protector. So as you go through all those counseling sessions and things and they can be very difficult to sit through, and things are said that maybe shouldn't be said, or whatever. But so it was a challenge from that standpoint. My other brother ended up having some challenges as well, and he left the house when he was a junior, so that left my sister and I.
Okay, so you two were younger.
Yeah. So
and your sister
was 2 years older than me. My oldest brother 4 years, then my other brother 2 years, then me, then my sister 2 years younger.
Okay, so they spaced that out just so that it was just the right amount of space, ages.
So to your question, how did that impact me? I think at the end of the day, it became down to, me and my little sister,
Okay.
And so, that became the unit.
So how was it for you growing up, like in school and stuff? Did you identify black or white, or were you just like, okay, I'm just me?
Yeah. So, Yeah, so you go through stages. I think in elementary school, um, a lot of my friends were white, and I wanted to be like them, and I wanted a white name. I wanted to be called Joshua. You know, I think my parents even bought me a
Guilty.
little doll named Joshua. Yeah, you know. And then in middle school, you become more aware, and a lot more of my friends were black, and but I had both. But here's the challenge. So my family, I'm Lily Whiteland. As it was a white household, and no problems with that, right? They loved us and raised us well, but it was white. We went to all white, church, and it was that environment. You leave out the house, you go to middle school or high school, and most of my friends were black. And then on the weekend you go to church, and most of my friends were white. So it's like you had these worlds that you operated in, and what happens is you end up even subconsciously switching gears, and you don't even realize it.
Yeah.
Like my wife now, she like she'll know like like when I'm going home, she's like, oh, there it goes. I'm like, what? So you don't know what's happening. But I do remember in middle school, I became very aware of how different my situation was. So here I was trying to identify with my blackness,
Okay.
and struggling with coming home to my whiteness, and trying to learn about black culture. I mean, it wasn't until 8th grade till I went to a black barber, let alone a black church, and so
Oh,
I'm
wow.
learning about culture, and becoming very aware of that, and then becoming embarrassed that, oh, I got these white parents,
Ah.
and I remember it came to a head. I believe it was 8th grade. My mom came to a track meet of mine, and I was like, ooh, my friends are gonna see my mom cheering for me. Uh-oh. And I completely ignored her, and she left. And I remember we had a conversation that night, and I was just like, look, we're your parents. We're gonna be your parents for to the end of time now. So deal with it, son. you know, and I mean, it was a pretty frank conversation,
Yeah.
and it wasn't that long after. I'm like, you know what? I mean, they're my parents. I love them. Like this is not a reflection of me. In fact, it's adding to me. And then
Yeah.
you get to high school and you figure out, oh, there's more kids like me. So I wasn't the only one, and I learned more about my blackness. Yeah.
So how did you learn about your blackness? What did you do to engage and just connect with the culture?
Slowly. I mean, the obvious thing is, you just have more black friends. So you're hanging with, black people. So that was one, but two was joining the gospel choir. That was a big thing for me. Three, going to a black barber, and having the barbershop talk. Every time I went, it's like, oh, okay, this is what it's like. It's a little different environment. So little things like that. But I got to be honest. Like my parents never really tried to have me cultured, black culture. What they tried to do is raise me to be a good human, and there's a lot of merit to that, and I don't really blame them for that, but it left some gaps in my cultural identity, I guess you could call it. And so it wasn't really until college that I really started learning, like, whoa, like there's a whole nother experience. Like I didn't experience racism growing up.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden in college, I'm at the Black Student Alliance house, and we're having all these conversations. I'm like, what? Like the cops did what to you? Like, and you start learning, like, all that kind of experience, as well as just learning, some of the, black music, black shows, that I'm like, to this day, like, if you trivia and pop culture and things, MTV and all. Nah, we weren't allowed to do it.
Wow. So if you were to go on Jeopardy, and that would be
It would be a quick name.
like,
Sit your butt down. That is
like
not
what happened? Gene, he missed that whole section.
Well, I tell you, the other part of my brother's messing up so much is by the time it got to me, the rules got a lot more strict. So,
and see, that's typically opposite, because even like for me, a mother of 4 with my twins, there were more guidelines, and I just held on to the reins a little bit harder. But as my youngest daughter, and then my son, as they got older, I'm like, okay, they'll be fine. And so I let go. But that was the opposite for you. Why was that?
You cannot even imagine the things, and both my brothers are upstanding citizens now. And they've made, a lot out of their lives. But back then, my parents went through hell and back, so they just kind of, the rules were always kind of strict. And then it was just like, yeah, you don't even think about going to somebody's party. Like, that ain't happening. There was no TV watching. There was no just going out and hanging at the corner. There was nothing like that. If you wanted to go somewhere, you had to go somewhere and be productive, which sounds kind of weird, but it actually helped me. I thank my parents for that now, because if I was going out, that's how I got into music. I play a lot of different instruments. That's how I got into a conservatory of music, because I played so much instruments. I was either doing something in music or something in sports or something with the church, or I was going out making money. So,
that's a good thing.
That's a good thing. Like, but, I did that kind of purposely because, I couldn't fill my time just going to hang with my friends. That wasn't going to happen.
Okay. So as you were in college now, because, and when we talked to a little bit about, you had gotten into some trouble and then you ended up going to stay with your oldest brother. So let's talk about that a little bit before we get to college.
Yeah. So rewind a little bit. So I mentioned that my oldest brother left. So when I was 10, he was 14, and I didn't talk to him. So there's a lot of hurt feelings there. And I was just like, I'm wrapped. It's done. I'm done. So anyway, I ended up working at a camp in upstate New York, right when I was 16, 17. And it was a YMCA camp. Beautiful, camp, like 4,000 acres in the Catskills. And around that time, my brother was with his wife and child and lived on a dairy farm that was owned by his wife's father in upstate New York, which I knew, but we had never really communicated. But I got in trouble at this camp. I had really half a beer and ran into the assistant director late at night, and he smelled it on my breath. So I got suspended. So it was go home.
Were you ever allowed to go back and serve in that capacity, or was that it?
Oh, I did. It was a 2-week suspension. I went back to camp.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So I was suspended. So where are you going to go for 2 weeks? You're going to go home to that strict environment, as much as I love my parents,
right?
Or go visit your brother, who you haven't talked to in 7 years. So I'm like, oh, obvious choice. Go visit my brother. Right.
Right.
So called him up. He's like, yeah, man, come on through. And what are you going to say to someone, your brother, that you haven't spoken to?
Yeah.
And you had all these feelings about. But it was a big lesson for me on just the power of forgiveness and just moving forward. It was amazing that first conversation we had when I got to his house, and I think it was early in the morning, or maybe it was at night after working on a farm. We were just sitting. It was quiet, like it's farmland. Like there's no sounds. It's just quiet under the stars, whatever. And we just talked, and it was like 7 years hadn't passed.
Wow.
And, and I understood kind of where he was at that point in his life, and respected that. And I'm like, you know what, or why rehash, hurt feelings, just, basically I told him, just get over it. Like, he's a new person.
Yeah.
Like, why bring up his old person and compare his old person to who he is today, or hold him accountable to who he was? I mean,
Right.
you may disagree, but in that situation, it's like he's clearly a changed person. He's clearly in a different place in his life, and let's move forward. So it was great.
So in that moment, you were able to make amends.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're wrapping up, you're getting ready to go to college. You get to college and you get connected with more culture, if you will. So when we also spoke, you talked about, because I said, well, who were you dating? Were you dating everybody? It didn't matter. And you said in high school, it really not. Let me clarify that. Not everybody, but you didn't have a preference of Black, white, Latino, or anything. You were just like, hey, whoever has the best personality, then that's who I'm rolling with.
Yeah, pretty much. Yes.
Okay. Until you got to college.
Mm-hmm. And even go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I mean, even in college, that was one of the benefits of growing up the way I did. Is I was comfortable with anyone, really. So, from a dating standpoint, it was the same way. Like, I'm looking at the person. I am looking at the personality. I'm looking, every race has got their own set of beauty characteristics, and it didn't really matter to me until you start running into situations where people let you know, like, yo, we don't like you dating these white girls.
Talk about that. What do you mean? People are letting you know? How did people let you know?
Well, there's one person I dated where, it was a good relationship, and all of a sudden her sorority sisters shut her down. Like, yo, you can't talk to him. Can't talk to that brother anymore. I mean, it was ghosted before ghosting. It's like, what happened? Like,
right.
They shut it down. And then the other situation that was a lot more serious happened my junior year. I was dating another white girl, and we got some hate mail, like threatening hate mail, like they're gonna string me up on a tree and they're gonna beat the heck out of her, and I mean, and they went so far as to, I mean, it's like stuff you see in the movies, like these letters. They had cut letters out of magazines. It wasn't even like typed or handwritten. It was like childish stuff, like almost laughable. I think I did laugh at first, and I was like, "What? This is some crazy mess." Like because a lot of time to try to
exactly. That's what I'm thinking, because I've seen, and you've seen it on TV, you've seen the movies where they take time and they're cutting out different letters from magazines and newspaper and stuff like that. Yes. I said, first of all, who's going to take the time and figure out what letters they need? Or do they just have like a big tub of alphabets and they just randomly select one and come and form this stuff? That's just a lot of thought put into an effort like that. And that's very graphic. Yeah. And it's sick.
Sick. And like I said, at first you kind of laugh, like someone really spent the time doing this, but then he's like, yo, this is kind of scary. Like, who has been watching us? Like, who's doing this? Like, and are they really trying, I don't know, maybe they would ambush me when I'm walking from one side of the campus to another, or ambush her, and it's that kind of, so we had the, FBI ended up getting called in, and the hall director of the campus it was a serious deal. I don't think they ever found anybody, but they made sure that there was a lot of presence around that situation.
That is
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. Well, I think there's one other relationship that I had that was pretty serious until our parents found out that we were actually an item, and then they did everything they could to dissuade her from talking to me. So I think it just got to a point where you're like, you know what, I'm tired of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because I can only imagine being in your shoes. But you, at that point, you were like, you know what? I don't want any more death threats. I don't want people just being ostracized because of me. I don't want, parents trying to just be so dastardly that they destroy, what could have been a good relationship. And you're just like, okay, you know what? What was going through your mind that made you get to that point, and how did you go about doing it?
At some point, I think that I just made a decision, like, I'm just not going down that path.
Yeah.
I mean, it would have to be someone really special, but I just you hit me once, hit me twice, hit me 3 times. It's a wrap, so you just kind of mature out of it.
Yeah.
And as I aged, and then I ultimately, met my wife, and the rest is history.
Speaking of that, so how did you and your wife meet? Because she's not white, but she's African American.
Yeah, she's 100% certified Black.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
What was that like? Because in my mind, I don't see you saying, okay, they're going right there. Let me go get her. How did you guys cross paths, and how did that all transpire?
She's probably gonna kill me for telling this story, but so we both used to work at Progressive Insurance.
Oh no, is that what Flo?
That's with Flo, yeah. Before Flo.
Okay.
Back in the days when Progressive was really just starting to expand and become really big. I worked in national accounts. She worked in Ohio accounts, and I just remember, there wasn't, at that point, there wasn't too many Black guys working there, and so I'm sure when you're one of a few, people notice you, right? And so one day I'm sitting in a lunchroom by myself, and I notice some ladies talking, and kind of looking over my way and whatever, and then she just came over, came up to the table, said, "Hi, I'm Rachel." you know, and she just introduced herself, sat down, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, this is a woman going after what she wants." And so yeah, we started talking and dating, and 25 years later.
25 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. 25 years later. How many children?
4. Well, I should say I have 3. I have 3 with my wife.
Okay. Got it. So you got all these childrens from this amazing relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So everything that you've gone through in life, how do you think it has prepared you for the successful man that you are now? Because clearly you are successful in a lot of different areas. In your daytime job, in your coaching career, and you have this digital TV platform as well. How do you think those experiences impacted you? And you talked a little bit about work ethics and what your parents taught you, but do you think there was a direct impact on the success that you've been able to achieve?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Oh my God. Without a doubt, and my parents, I don't know if they'll end up listening to this, but they always said I was the easiest child to raise. and the most difficult afterwards, because I did have some anger when I left, just because of I thought they were too strict, right? And but grown man now, you look back and say, what did I learn from my dad? Well, my dad worked in New York. He got up at 4:30 every day, or 5 o'clock. He was out of the house by 5:30. I used to, in elementary school, I used to go downstairs to the kitchen and get my bowl of cornflakes and my cinnamon toast, and I would be downstairs and catch him before he left, and he would catch the train, but that was clockwork. He'd be out the house same time every day, come home same time, have dinner with the family, and then he would go into his office and work until 10, go to sleep, get up to same time the next day. He'd get up early on a Saturday, go do the grocery shopping, and or actually he'd clip all the coupons first, then he'd get grocery shopping. But so the habits, the work habits clearly is something that you get into that flow. So I did pick that up from them. But then just being productive with your time. Both my parents were really big on that. And as I mentioned, with my music, some days I practice 4 hours a day. In between track or soccer and church, and I'm practicing music. So very, productive with the time that I had. Oh, and then I had to study sometimes too, right? So that has enabled me to take on multiple jobs and projects, and really, get everything done and find the time, and not make excuses. If I got to get up at this point, I get up at 4:30, so I can eat by 5, so I can go work out at 6 o'clock, come back by 7:30, get my day started by 8, and then I'm working oftentimes till 9, 10, 11 o'clock, and starting the day over. There's time in the day if you make use of that time, and make sure you're taking care of your body and your mind to give you that energy to make it through. And so I think those habits were formed very early that have transitioned over to my life today. And the other part of that was, being instilled that there's nothing that you can't do. Don't, you want to experience something. My parents were really good about helping us experience the world. My dad was a very successful executive at Pfizer, but we didn't live rich, but we experienced things. We did a lot of travel. And so I think that spirit, that energy, just in terms of, hey, go explore, go do something, whatever you put in your mind to do, you can do. And I've taken that into my life.
Oh, I love that. And clearly you've done that. So now that you're a dad, how has that, what you learned growing up, how has that translated into your own parenting style? Because you talked about how by the time it got to you and your sister, who also happened to be biracial, it became really strict. So where do you fall in executing parenting now to your children?
For right or wrong, I like to say this, like I didn't graduate from parenting school, right? I don't have a
Amen.
I'm certainly not going to sit up here and be like I'm a perfect parent, but I think I got like a lot of parents think that I got perfect kids, and one of the things that we had decided to do, that was similar to when I grew up. My mom was a homemaker. I was fortunate enough with the jobs that I had that my wife could stay home. And so we elected that we both agreed that, she would be home when the kids were young, really into, I think, middle school, which for us worked out great. Where, kids could come home and they weren't slugging back and forth from daycare and anything like that. And so that was extremely helpful. And that actually allowed me, as basically the breadwinner, to move with the organization. So I had jobs in Ohio, and they moved me to Connecticut, and then from Connecticut to Michigan. And if if we were both working, that would have been a lot more challenging, a lot more difficult to do. So the fact that she was basically held the house down, allowed me to progress in my career, right? And so that was helpful, very helpful from a parenting standpoint, to have a parent home. But I think as far as being strict, she ended up taking a lot more of that role. I tended to not have the same patience. So by the time it got to me, I really didn't have a lot of patience. But there was a lot more rope that they had before it got to that point, and so I was a lot more lenient, I think, than my parents were. But right or wrong, I don't know. But I think, with also me focusing a lot more on the work, and the travel, what I tried to do is make sure that I made time for my kids. So forced time. So I coached, like my daughter played, softball. I coached the softball team. All my kids played soccer. I coached all the soccer teams. That forced me to be home and with them during those times. Son liked to play basketball. I was, so I tried to be present in the things that they were doing, which my parents did also. They were huge supporters of my music, and I traveled all over the place. I went to Europe with my music, and they were there on all most of my music escapades, and as well as my athletic things. So I tried to do that with my kids.
So as we begin to wrap up, talk a little bit about Noah.
Yeah. So Noah's a special kid. Noah is my oldest son with my wife. My oldest son, actually, I had my senior year of college. And that's Isaac. But and then there's Autumn, my daughter, and then Noah, and then Mark. So Noah he's a bright kid. He's one of those kids that rarely had to study. He just got it. And he's a deep thinker, which
I could tell.
Yeah, he's a deep thinker, and so I get him. I appreciate that, and he's a romantic too, which I'm not really romantic, but he's creative in that space as well. But I think he's caring. He's emotionally intelligent, but he's just really bright. There's nothing that he can't do if he puts his mind to. Like you said, he wrote a book because he wanted to write a book. He still will finish out a degree, but he went to coding school. He learned how to code computers, and now he's writing programs and writing training programs and doing all this other stuff. He's just one of those kids that is still trying to find his lane, but his lane is like this big. He can do a lot of different things, which he's experimenting with now, and finding out he's really good over here. But he wants to do more of this over here. He really wants to expand into his writing. That's his passion. He's got a really creative eye, really creative mind for his writing. He's been writing since elementary school. He's writing little books.
Oh, wow.
So he's always had a knack for writing. So I really hope that, he's able to pursue that more. He's making money doing IT, so IT is paying the bills, but I think his passion and potentially, he could be extremely successful with his writing.
Yeah. And I'm pretty excited because I'll get a chance to interview him next week. Mm-hmm. So I did when you mentioned, back in the fall that he had written a book, I said, really? I said, I'm going to buy it because I love reading books by authors because I think it tells a story about who they are.
Yeah.
And so his book, it could have been so easy with these kids laying on their back on the grass with some skateboards under the tree. And I'm like, this is interesting. So I just wanted you to set that up as we wrap up, because when I get to the point where I'm interviewing him, then, you know, I'll be able to say, yeah, your dad was bragging on you and all this other kind of stuff.
Yeah. I have a parent likes to brag on their kids, and I could brag on all of them. They're great kids. They really are. But yeah, that's his talent. And it could have been so easy. Ask him what that means, and dig into some of those poems.
Oh yeah.
That's
Yeah.
how he
And
expresses himself.
what I typically do is I go through and I'll, like, another person, this is a book. So, you know, I have my Post-its. So I'll be having Post-its when I interview him next week. But Gene, I just want to, just before we wrap up, I'd like to go to see what type of comments we've gotten. So do you have a few minutes? We can do that real quick. Okay. So it looks like Leah, is it Horner? She said, "Good evening, Kishen and Jean. Do you know her?"
Yes.
Perfect. Okay.
Church.
So from church. Oh, nice. Ina, hey, that's good. Oh, when we were talking about, you talked about your parents, they didn't make you choose to be black or white, but they just let you be. And she said, that's good. They didn't make him choose sides. And then in terms of your dad and how you gave his regimen from when he woke up to by the time he left to get on the train and come back and eat dinner and then, you know, wrap up at 10 o'clock. She said it's good to be productive. And then also in college with the death threats and, you know, the sorority sisters and then just the parents trying to interfere with the relationship. She was like, wow, people are so crazy. And then in real life, Peggy said, yeah, Peggy responded. She was like, in real life, this stuff happened. Yeah, this is story. Ordinary people with extraordinary lives. Yeah. And then Tasha was interviewed. She has a book called A Winning Season. She also has a coaching company. She is out of Dallas, Texas. She did travel to Grand Rapids, Michigan a couple weeks ago, and she presented her story, just mind-blowing. And she said, it is good as parents that they gave him freedom to explore his passions. So you talk about just traveling and, you know, your musical gifts and then, you know, playing in sports and then just all this other kind of stuff that formed the man that you are today. And I think that as parents, even like what you sharing about Noah and, you know, your other children, how, you know, just being exposed to different things. Yeah. I think that just gives them a more realistic scope of what life could be like versus this is all I'm exposed to. So this is all there is.
Right. You have to expand your horizon. You at least be able to see past, you know, your computer. You got to be able to see out to the world and start to percolate. Say, oh, you know, you start to realize I could be doing this, I could be doing that, or I don't know about that. There's more out there, and have that sense of curiosity.
Yeah. So those were the comments that people have made. We got a few hearts here. But again, like we opened up, I want to close the same way in terms of, you mentioned that you offer coaching and other types of, I guess, opportunities for people to better themselves. So talk a little bit about that and how people can get in touch with you so that somebody may want to reach out to you. I mean, you've shared your story, which I think is pretty fascinating. So I want to thank you so much for sharing your story. But how can people get in touch with you? Well, first of all, a little bit about what you do with the coaching and then other things that you're involved in, and then how people can get in touch with you.
Yeah. So coaching, you know, let's just level set. Coaching is really, it's not about me. It's not about the coach, right? Coaching is it's about you, and bringing out of you what's already in there. So that's my job as a coach. Now, what do I, what do I use to be able to be successful? Can you guys hear that?
Mm-hmm.
Hey.
Ricky Ricardo.
I'm hooked up to I'm diabetic, and that means my dinner blood sugars are skyrocketing right now. But
Do you
anyway,
need to go?
no, I'm good.
Okay.
But so it's about you. But I rely on 20 years of successful leadership experience. I've led any number of teams to top performance. I've been at the bottom and brought it to number one multiple times. So I rely a lot on just people experiences, and how to strategize, how to execute. So everything that would be involved from leadership, but leadership at the core is about influence. And and how do you get influence? You got to connect. And so how do you connect? You have to be in that person's space. You have to want to get to know them. You have to respect them. You have to have empathy for them. So those are the things that really that I focus in on. And then I use my certifications. I'm a partner with a company called Management Research Group, where I've got what's called an LEA, Leadership Effectiveness Analysis, IDI, which measures your leadership behaviors as well as your energy. I'm also certified in DISC through the John Maxwell team. So we can look at whatever's more appropriate for you and where you're trying to be, to see, okay, what sort of, tests or things that we would measure, if we're going to measure anything at all, that would be of help to you. Otherwise, it would be just straight coaching, and figuring out where do you want to be, what's holding you back, and let's put a plan together to get you where you want to be. It's not about me. It's just about you identifying what you want to be, where you want to be, and how long you want to take to get there, and then putting a plan in place to hold yourself accountable. And then I'm there to help you through that process.
Nice. So if somebody's looking for coaching, how do they get in touch with you?
You can email me at bakergene91@gmail.com.
Baker, Baker.
.gene91@gmail.com.
Perfect. And because you do have a digital TV platform that you have some shows on, they can also see your interviews there. And how do they find that out?
You can find me on the Sean Fair Digital TV Network on Gene's Tune-Up Time, show all about leadership. And that is on Stage Plus. On Stage Plus, you can download the app. And that On Stage Plus is also found on Roku, on Apple, Google, I don't even know all the digital platforms, but I think it has a reach of 150, 250 million people, whatever.
Yes.
But it really doesn't matter. That's not how many people are watching it, but that's the reach. But yeah, so go download On Stage Plus, find Sean Fair Digital TV Network, find my show, and you can find Stories with Kishen on that same platform as well.
That is so true. Gene, I want to thank you so much for your time. What I'll do afterwards is at some point between now and I just say forever, that the podcast will be created from this interview. When it's created, I will tag you so that for those who weren't able to tune in today, they'll get a chance to listen to it when they're working out, when they're at their desk, when they're doing whatever, or they can watch the video as well. So I know we had some glitches because I'm like, why is that spinning? But I'm working on trying to edit that stuff out. But nonetheless, so when the podcast is released, you'll be notified. And then also the link to the YouTube. So
yeah, I didn't see anything spinning. Not on my end.
Oh, yeah. I'm like, What happened? But regardless, so thank you so much for sharing your story.
Yeah.
I look forward to next week when I interview Noah Baker, who is a direct descendant from you. No, is that
Mhm.
right? Descendant?
Mhm.
Yeah, he's your son. So I'm looking forward to interviewing with him. So again, thank you, Jean, for your time. Thank you for everybody who checked in, who listened. Share this with somebody. Tag somebody who needs to hear this. Somebody, maybe you need coaching. Then Jean is the place. He's the place where the man that you need to go to get that information. Tune in next week, same time, and you will be hearing another extraordinary interview by the author of this book. The book says It Could Have Been So Easy, and that's by Noah
Noah A.
Baker.
Baker next Tuesday.
Noah,
7
oh, look
Don't miss
at you. Just like a dad, just like a dad. Okay, thank you so much, Jean. You hold on. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you next week.